So now we're going to be talking about the skill set of strategy, or strategy as a skill set. So one thing I realized about many people learning strategy is that, or they start with like learning frameworks, what framework do you use to organize that strategy session? Those are things that some people that learn strategy are first of all concerned about, but frameworks are to strategists what Photoshops are to new designers. So for the designers in the house, you know that by now you should understand that you are not a designer because you use Photoshop or you know how to use Photoshop, or you are not a designer because you know how to use Canva, because there is more to your understanding of what design is beyond how to use a tool. Do you understand? So yeah, we've talked about the mindset, which I think many of you very well understand, and so we can continue. So what are the skill sets that a strategist must have? The most important skill of a strategist is your ability to think. So your ability to think about that. That's the most important thing. Most people don't think, by the way, because thinking is very hard. And that's why you are valuable as a strategist. Thinking is very hard. Requires method. It requires to think properly. You need to have a method to think properly. But most people think just as a natural form of analysis. Yes, okay, I'm thinking, okay, should I go this way or should I go that way? Most of us are more instinctive and instinctual, which is not a bad thing. But if you want to actually achieve a specific result, or you want to win a specific whatever it is, that's not the type of thinking that does it. You have to be more deliberate. And that type of thinking, most people are not trained to do. And even generally, most people don't think. And a few people that think, it's very clear when you think about how society is and the way some people achieve some significant results compared to some other people, you realize that, one of the big differences is that some people think and some people don't think. Right? So all of this is to say that the most important thing about being a strategist, or the most important skill, is cognition and metacognition. Now, metacognition is where things get complex. Okay, someone in the comments says, yes, exactly what I was saying. Okay. Yeah, so cognition is, your ability to think, your ability to put information together, make sense of information, your ability to recollect, everything that the brain does properly. But there is also another layer, which is metacognition. So metacognition is thinking about thinking. So let me give you an example. So sometimes, if you want to help someone, but you don't want to be there every single time to have to tell them what to do, what it means is that you have to create a framework that kind of guides them on what to do, as if you were there, right? So if I remind you now of what we define strategy as at the beginning, where we say strategy is an integrative set of choices, it means that as a strategist, you have to come down to the layer of people's thinking and create something that they can build their own thinking on, something that guides their own thinking. So it means that you need to now start thinking about, okay, what are the flaws of how people generally think and make decisions? And how can I build something that guides how they would think in a way that gets them the ultimate result they want, right? So cognition and metacognition are the most important things you have to do or develop as a strategist. Thinking is very hard, trust me. There are times when I'm working on something and I get a headache, but things have gotten better and we're going to get to talk about that very soon. But here are those two things that are important as a strategist. So laying the right foundation, okay? So there are some things that, right here, we're talking about knowledge and skill set, right? The skill set is the right foundation for you to build on. But first of all, it's very possible for you to be a strategist and be an excellent strategist just by intuition. Like it doesn't mean that you have to have gone to school to study a particular skill or whatnot. But the reality is that some knowledge kind of puts you at an advantage if as a strategist. Okay, so example is, philosophy. You are interested in philosophy, how the wisdom of how the world works, the wisdom of how human beings work, the wisdom of how things that exist. You are very interested in philosophy. You are interested in history. You're interested in history because, like we said, history always repeats itself. So you want to be able to predict and predetermine how are things going to happen based on how they've happened in the past, right? So history, psychology, human behavior, business, entrepreneurship, politics, marketing. You can imagine having all of this varied understanding, and then you are trying to make a plan, or you are trying to come up with a strategy. You are going to be coming up with a theory that is much more accurate and is much more likely to get you an outcome that you want. If you remember that we defined that strategy has a theory, right? And that theory is not guaranteed that it will work, but that theory is based on, okay, from my understanding and analysis of what is going on and the information we have, if we do this, or if we go by this set of rules and guidelines, we'll be able to achieve this outcome, right? So what having this foundation does for you, and this doesn't mean that you have to even have like an in-depth understanding of philosophy, in-depth of psychology, but your curious mind has to be interested in all of these things, but because they are the basic foundation of how the world works. Psychology, for instance, is, cares about how human beings think and why they behave the way they behave, right? So if you can invest in understanding why human beings think the way they think and how they behave the way they behave, there's so much about you that would be different from the average person. The way you react to situation will be completely different, because you can read deeper into how things are happening and why things are happening the way they are happening, which gives you an edge when you have to come up with a strategy, for instance. Okay, so the more you understand all of this varied, knowledge about the world, the better you'll be able to come up with, more accurate strategy. So that's about laying the foundation, okay? So let me break it down to you. I like to simplify things as much as possible. A strategist's job is essentially two things, learning how to see and helping other people see. Those are the things that you need to do. That's your job as a strategist, period. You learn how to see and you help other people to see. So when I say learn how to see, I mean, we've talked about this. There are certain skills that helps and improves your ability to see significantly. Your ability to read in between the lines, your ability to connect dots, your ability to interpret things properly, right? So example of such skill set is, research, pattern recognition, your ability to see how this thing, and this thing are similar, right? Pattern matching, your ability to question. In fact, let me emphasize questioning. Your ability to ask questions and your ability to listen is one of the biggest skills that you can have, especially in the age where artificial intelligence is going to flush everything out of the system. I tell you that your ability to ask very intelligent questions is more important than having ready answers. And as a strategist, what you care about is not having the answers. What you care about is asking the right question that unravels the answers that you need. Do you understand? So your ability to ask questions and your ability to listen. The listening might not necessarily be with your ears. It could be with your eyes. It could be with your mental note of observing how things are happening around you. Semantics, semantics has to do with definition of things, the meaning of words. Do you get? Because as a strategist, I realized that this is one of your strongest tools, your ability to define something, to say this is this word and this is what this word means, is a game changer. Because sometimes you will need to, in some situation, create a new definition for a word that already exists, or even create a word that doesn't yet exist. That's part of your job. So semantics is important, observation, listening, synthesizing, the ability to take different information and data together and put it together in a very cohesive and holistic manner, which is very difficult, but is very important skill that helps you to see better. Generating or getting insights, your ability to look deep enough to figure out what are the underlying issues that affect the whatever it is you are looking at. Your ability to detect problems, your ability to solve problems, analyze, organize, synthesize information, and critical thinking. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the common skill sets that you can actually improve on. You can improve on your critical thinking, you can improve on your ability to solve problems, you can improve on your ability to ask questions and listen better. So the other thing here is how to help others see. So before I finish talking about this, I want you guys to do something for me in the comment section, right? Of the 3 different attributes that we talked about, that's the courage, curiosity, and empathy. Which of these attributes do you think is most relevant to your ability to see? And I want you to also tell me which of those attributes are most relevant to your ability to help other people see. Okay, while you put that in the comments, your ability to help other people see. So now let's say you've taken your time to evaluate and you've come to understand something very deeply. Is not sufficient, because what you now have to do is you need to start saying, okay, I've come to understand this thing, or I've come up with this very brilliant strategy that will help us to win, that will help us to get what we want. So what do I need to do now? I need to get other people that are going to act and take actions to implement the strategy. So you need the skill set to actually help to carry other people along in order to be able to deliver or perform the strategy that you have come up with. Do you understand? So one is facilitation, how to facilitate. So what facilitation is just your ability to help people to think. So sometimes, if you think about it, all you need to help people to solve their problem is actually just listening and asking them questions. Honestly, there are many clients, for instance, I've had that they felt like my interaction with them was very therapeutic. They solved their own problems just by me asking questions deliberately. And those questions were helping them to connect the dots by themselves. And many times, if you've ever been to therapy, that's something similar that a therapist will do for you, is that you start asking questions that will help you start to realize that, something happened in your childhood that influences how, your relationship is playing out, or something happened once a while ago that has influenced how you see the world and how you behave, and sometimes you don't realize that thing because there's this famous saying that you cannot read your own label from inside the bottle. Sometimes when you are inside the bottle, it's very difficult to read your own label. So sometimes it takes another person to look at you and help you to see yourself. Okay, like the example of how many of you have said you became a strategist because someone else pointed it out that, oh, you seem to have a very rare and interesting ability. Okay, so helping other people see, facilitation, learning to hold conversations. See, it is very important. It's a social skill, but it's also a professional skill. You need to be able to engage people and at different levels, whether a big audience, small audience, one person to person, because sometimes, you get business from your ability to just conversate with people. I was talking to a client one day, about, how we could, a potential client then, I was talking to him about his business. I was not trying to sell anything. We were just having a conversation. And then I started to talk about how, he could tell a particular type of story around his business, and he could do this and do. And it was like, he looked at me like this and he was like, did anybody tell you anything? Because apparently, what I was talking to him about innocently, he was already building a product, a new product and a new business to address that specifically. And so, I mean, what is the best way to sell? Someone else unlocking or realizing that you can be of value to them. That's the best way to sell. Instead of you trying to be the one to promote it. So your ability to have conversation, your ability to conceptualize, put things together and make it make sense to other people. The ability to communicate. Now, storytelling is a very big one. Storytelling is very important because as human beings, we are hardwired for storytelling. It's easier to assimilate and take in information by sharing stories, okay? So, and storytelling is not just about creating slides. It's not just about saying once upon a time. Like, there's an art to it, an art to, helping to build tension and infuse emotion into, like, communication, helping people to see, helping people to connect, emotional value to something. So insight, big picture thinking, rhetoric, briefing, your ability to be brief is one of the most important things you can have as a strategist, because when you think about, you've gone through this bulk of information, you've tried to synthesize it, you've tried to understand it. It's not enough to let everybody know that you've gone through this bulk of information. Sometimes you still need to present everything you have done in just one line or one page. So being able to be brief is an excellent skill that you need to cultivate in helping other people see. Directing, leadership. Leadership is another important one, and that ties into courage very well, even though I'm answering your question already. Planning, presentation. And bottom line here is that, you see how what I'm trying to do is to, outside of this class, without coming to look at your notes, you can go away and have that understanding that, you're building courage, curiosity and empathy would help you to see things better and will give you the opportunity to help other people see. So that's how I'm connecting the mindset part to the skill set part. Okay, so this is one of my favorite image whenever I'm talking about strategy, right? So this is about seeing for the most part, actually. So, there is data, and in this age of information, this is kind of where you are at that information level. The internet has all the information that you need, right? Knowledge is when you now start to get a hold of the solid understanding of different subject matter. If you have knowledge, then there is insight. Insight is when you now start to make new revelations, right? And then wisdom is when you're able to eventually make all those connections. And yes, so I don't want to talk too much about this. As a strategist as well, it's also important to have hindsight, insight, and foresight. You need to unlock your third eye. You need to be able to look at things. You need to be very reflective. Look at things that has happened in the past and bring wisdom out of it. Like, okay, these things happened because. Then you need to look at the present and the past and say, okay, these are the revelations. These are the insight I have. And foresight is you need to be able to look at the future also and predict based on this pattern of events, based on how things have always been, based on principles, how are things going to turn out in the future. So a strategy is someone that is about your ability to see. Like, I cannot overemphasize that, because not everybody sees. Everybody looks, but not everybody sees. But as a strategist, your job is to see. And it's a mental thing, it's not a visual thing, it's not a physical thing per se, even though that helps you, but your ability to see. And that happens by, being able to connect the dots over time. Like I said, you lay the foundation of having the knowledge, having the right mindset, building the right skill set, and that undying curiosity. Do you understand? Undying curiosity helps you to just, one day, I would like to know what is the most interesting thing that you found out that connected each other. Like you just realize that, if I do this and I do this, this works. Do you understand? And like your job as a strategist is to figure out how things work. And to be able to figure out how things work, you need to be able to connect all the components of how anything should work. Do you get? So let me not dwell too much on this. So I'll talk briefly on my own personal experience, how being an architect or an architecture student made me a better strategist. And I fear that some people may not be able to relate, so I won't dwell too much on that. Okay, so as an architecture student, there are so many things that being an architecture student helped me to become, and the biggest part of it is it helped me to see. I became a better seer, right? First of all, think about what an architect does. An architect literally goes to his paper, he sits down and he thinks about, okay, this is the space I have, these are the people that will use this space. This is what they will use this space for. And these are the conditions that would make their use of this space optimal. And then starts to create something on the same paper, like so from his mind to the paper, and then eventually breaks everything down in details and hands it over to other people to build. That's very similar to what a strategist does. You have considered very important information. It's about consideration, considering very important things that would impact the favorable outcome of something you want to achieve. So if you are not an architect or you are not familiar with architecture, I might lose you a little bit, but I'm trying not to talk too much about it. Oh well, I will stop there. So basically, architecture for me was one of those things that helped me to unlock many levels of what a strategist should be, to be very honest. How you can sit in your room and create something that people can enter into and enjoy. Like think about how someone can enter a space and it influences immediately how they feel, right? How they feel, it can influence their mood, it can influence the decisions they make. That is a very, very powerful thing because, as an architect, you are operating at that high level. Another important thing about architecture, which I think is a little bit too esoteric at this point, is something we call perspective. So there's this drawing technique we call perspective. So perspective is like drawing something in 3 dimensions, okay? And I might be losing some of you here. But the interesting thing about perspective is that you can take different views to look at the exact same thing. So you can look at something from the very top, you can look at it from the side, you can look at it from beneath, you can look at it from all sorts of angles. And that is your job as a strategist as well. Your consideration of anything or any particular matter or subject needs to be in-depth, not just in one direction, but you need to be able to go 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimension. Like you need to be interested in depth as a strategist. Okay, so those are some of the ideas I'm borrowing from architecture, but I rest my case here before I lose all of you completely. Okay, so now let's talk about how to improve your thinking. garbage in, garbage out. So the quality of what you have inside here is the quality of what comes out, right? So input, the way you can increase your thinking by input is thinking through listening. Like I talked earlier about, how the quality of and your ability to listen is very important. Thinking through observing, thinking through reading. You have to be this part of curiosity. You have to be willing to take in so much so that you deepen your understanding of, the world and how things work. And then the other way to improve your thinking is, output. And this output has to do with thinking through speaking. Has it happened to you before that you were talking to someone about something maybe you know about, and then you were shocked by how much you know? If it has happened to you, please just let me just signify in the comment. You're talking to someone about something and you're wondering like, wow, so I know so much about this. I didn't realize I knew this much. So sometimes, talking about something to other people helps to make conscious what is already subconscious. The subconscious mind has a richer depth than anything else, than your conscious mind rather. So in that case, speaking is one of the things that you can do to activate your unconscious mind or connect your unconscious mind to your conscious mind. Because let me help you understand this, that being a strategist is very, very intuitive. It's not algorithmic, like, okay, 2 + 2 is 4. That's not strategy. It's not predictable, because if strategy is predictable and you go and fight a war, you will die. So the idea of strategy, for instance, in war, which is a very good example or picture of what strategy is that you always have to do things in a way that is most unpredictable but still get you your desired outcome. So, and that requires creativity, that requires being innovative, that requires intuition, right? But it's not just an intuition, it's an educated intuition, because you have put in so much into yourself, and then you can bring out so much when it's needed and put things together in the most unexpected way. Okay, so one of the biggest thing you have to be and you have to do as a strategist is you have to write. Because thinking and writing go like this. They are one and the same. Writing is basically thinking. Writing is, because if you think about it, there are sometimes you know so much, but until you actually sit down and you start to write, you cannot actually access and concretize what you know. For me to take this class, for instance, it took me many days, because I was like, okay, I know all of these things in my head, but like, how do I make someone else understand it? How do I articulate it in a way that, is not mumbled and chaotic like it is in my head? And so I had to write and write and write and refine and arrange for many days before I could come up with something I felt was coherent enough to share. Okay, so you can improve your thinking through writing, and most importantly, through writing, actually. Because the depth of what you know is in your subconscious, and writing is actually making conscious what is unconscious or subconscious. And finally, thinking through visual mapping. This is something I don't think many people actually engage as much or know how to do as much. You have to be able to map things. You have to be able to use visual elements to simplify concepts. So if I want to simplify something, I can use shapes and colors to arrange it, and it has more potency in being able to communicate what I'm trying to say, more than me saying many words. Do you understand? And so, but we're not here to talk exactly about techniques and all of these things, but I want you to hold it in hand that if you really want to become better strategists, first of all, remember I established that I established that the most important skill as a strategist is your ability to think. That's cognition and metacognition. So if you want to improve your ability to think, you have to improve your input, that's listening, observing, reading, and then you have to improve your output, that's speaking, writing, and mapping things. All right. So next, I'm going to talk about mental models. And this is another way to improve your thinking. So mental models are useful tools for one, solving problems, decision-making, and critical thinking. So if you think about it, there's a particular way your brain works, your own mind. There's a particular way your mind works. There's a particular way your mind, looks at the world and understands or interprets the world. There's a particular way you solve problems. There's a particular way you, what else? You make decisions. So there is a mental model. So one interesting thing is that to become a better strategist, you need that level of awareness. You need to now start to figure out how your mind works so that you can now start to improve it and maybe improve how your mind works. And apart from improving how your mind works, you need to now start to learn how other people think. Learn other people's mental model and adapt it to your own. So some examples of mental models could be, for instance, first principle thinking, system thinking. All of these are usually approaches to solving problems, but it's not just about solving problems. Sometimes it's helpful to make sense of information. Okay. So there's something, for instance, they call second order. I can't remember that word now. Anyways, so the idea of mental model generally is just a framework for you to understand how things work. It's also a framework for you to make decisions and a framework for you to solve problems.